Hi, I'm John Knowles, software trainer for Adobe, and in this video we'll be talking about transcription, translation, and text-based editing. Great features that will really speed up your workflow in Premiere Pro. Let's take a look. Okay, I have a sample project here. I'm going to import some media to transcribe. Incidentally, I have the text-based editing workspace set up here. I can reach that through the drop-down menu under this icon here in the upper right there, or I can go to Window, Workspace, and choose Text-Based Editing from there. You don't have to use this workspace layout, but it is already set up for you to do transcription and other text-based editing techniques. We have the text panel open here on the left, nice and big, top to bottom. A combination source and program window here. You can obviously split those apart if you want to. Big wide timeline here, and your project panel and other panels have been moved to the upper right. Now, when it comes to transcription, you have three options. You can choose to transcribe everything that you import with a setting in the preferences. You can do it on a clip-by-clip basis in the import window, or you can wait till your clips are in and then decide which ones to transcribe once they're already inside the project. It's totally up to you how you do it. Let me show you all three options right now. All right, that first option I mentioned, you get to it in the settings and you go down to media analysis and transcription. And there's an option there to automatically transcribe clips. If that is checked, you can choose to automatically transcribe all imported clips or only transcribe clips in a sequence automatically. All right, so you have two options there. And you have the option to label speakers. You're going to see this setting a lot in the program. You can choose to separate speakers. If you know that there's multiple people speaking in a clip, you can choose to have them separated, and then you can name them afterwards. Or you know for sure there's just one person speaking, or labeling the different speakers doesn't matter. In that case, just choose don't separate, and it won't do that automatically. And you can also enable language auto detection here, and you choose a default language for your system. So, you might be an Italian speaker, for example, or Portuguese. That'll be the default, and it will if it detects something else on this list, it will switch to that language. And these are great settings to have on, for example, if you're bringing in a lot of interview clips, you're doing a piece of documentary work or something unscripted, and you absolutely know you need transcriptions of everything. Just turn this setting on, and everything you import will be automatically transcribed. Now I'll turn these options off, and I'll show you another place to set that transcription preference, and that's here in the import window. And if I'm going to say import this clip right here, I have the automatic transcription options over here in this column on the right. So here I will toggle that switch. I can choose the language as well as the auto detection. I can choose to label speakers. In this case, I'm not going to label speakers, and I'm going to auto transcribe all imported clips. So when I hit import, it's going to bring that clip in, and I have a progress window here, which is showing me the speech-to-text transcription is happening. So if I double-click that clip to load it into the source panel, you'll see that the transcript comes up here in the text window. This is a short clip with not much dialogue in it here. This is just some voiceover. So you see there's the transcript. And the third way to transcribe a clip, and go back here to the import window. Let me turn that option back off, and I'm just going to bring in this coach interview here and import that. If I load that clip into the source monitor, you'll see there in the text window under transcript, it has nothing there because we haven't turned on that toggle yet in either the import window or the preferences. So the option now is to transcribe source. And that option will be there whether it's in the source window or you've already dragged it to a sequence. In this case, you have the option there to transcribe source clips, and it'll show up like this with the blue button at the top because it's in sequence mode rather than source clip mode. So either way will get you there. So you can choose to bring in your clips and transcribe them once they're already in the project, or turn these options on either here in the import window or in the preferences to auto transcribe clips once they're brought in. All right, my transcription finished here for that imported coach clip, and you see there it separated the speakers for me. If I want to change those options, by the way, let me bring up another quick standalone clip here. I could click this blue transcribe button. When it's loaded in the source monitor, if you click that button there, you'll get this pop-up for transcription. You can choose to auto detect the language, and there you can choose separate speakers. So let me go back to the other imported interview. And there we go. That's how the panel looks over here. You can see speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3. These can be relabeled as long as you have the clip open here in the source monitor. And you can choose between the 3 different speakers or edit the speaker names. So in this case, speaker 1 looks like it might be the director, and speaker 2 looks like it might be the subject of this interview here, who's Keeland. And speaker 3 looks like the interviewer. And there's one extra speaker here. It says unknown. That's probably just a random crew person speaking in the background. I'm going to leave that one alone. And I can add additional speakers here if I feel like it missed any voices and I need to relabel them. And that automatically updates this column here so you can see all the different speakers. Keelan did not say this line here, for example. So I'm going to click those 3 dots and change that to the director again, or perhaps that was the unknown crew member that was speaking. So you can just go through and quickly spot change those if you want. You've got time code here above each of these lines, as well as some pauses. That's shown here with the 3 dots. And if you hover over those, it tells you how long that pause was. Now, if you put this clip into a sequence, you'll notice that the look of this changes slightly. You don't see the 3 dots next to the speakers, for example, and you can't edit those. That's because it has to be loaded up into the source monitor. So you're working on the source transcript at that point, not the sequence transcript. That's when you can modify things like these names, for example. Now you'll notice here at the bottom of the transcript panel, there's a checkbox here to follow active monitor. That means that this transcript will be linked to whichever monitor you have open here. In this case, I have what's in the source viewer, which is this clip here. Let me change that to a different clip. Here's that drip ad. You notice that the transcript window changes when the ad is open in the source monitor versus program monitor. It goes back to the coach interview, which is loaded here in the sequence. So that little checkbox will determine which one of these it follows. You can uncheck that and then just manually select, okay, I want to show what's in the source monitor, show that transcript, or I want to manually show what is in the program monitor and the sequence. So that's up to you whether you want to leave this checked and have it switch automatically, or you want to have a dedicated button to push and manually choose which transcript you're going to follow. So I'm going to turn that back on and go down here to the interview I have loaded into the sequence.
Interview trainer, take 2, marker.
Very good. So, Cybex machine, bounding, plyometrics, explosions. So just a series of different kinds.
So you see there's a running highlight there as it tracks what's being said on screen. It follows along here in the transcript.
Explosionary exercises. So a lot of plyometrics.
And highlights
basically
the words that are being spoken.
And do you find that, like, with an app?
Now let me very quickly go over some of the controls and options here in the transcript panel. We've already gone over this follow active monitor switch down here at the bottom. Next to that is a slider. This is going to change the font size. So you can make it larger or smaller. I'll leave it parked roughly in the middle right there. And next to that, I can choose transcript view options by clicking on those sliders. And I can choose to view different things in the transcript: filler words, markers, low confidence words. And then we have things like untranscribed sources, speakers, pauses. And you can set a minimum pause length here for what it considers to be a pause, because there's an option later I'll show you to remove those pauses. If you don't want a very short pause to be removed, perhaps you want to keep a shorter pause as part of the speech there, you can crank this slider a little bit longer, and only those longer pauses past 0.88 seconds, for example, would be removed by that. And then you can choose, when you do a search up there in the top of the panel, do you find the whole word only, or do you match the capitalization? So there's checkboxes there, for example. I'm actually going to turn whole words only on and get back to that. Going back up to the top here, filler words. So a filler word is something like or in English, and those vary depending on the language in use. Premiere Pro can detect some of those filler words and highlight them for you, and you can choose to remove them. And right now they're not being shown inside the transcript here. So if I turn that on, any of those filler words that would have been stripped out are now visible there in the transcript. You can see it's already being altered with some of those filler words, and it's going to just say the word filler in brackets there. Now going back here to the top of the panel, there's that search window. I'm going to type in the word athlete. And there it goes. It found 3 results. And I can use these up and down arrows here to see all 3 instances that it found. Yep, there it is. It found athlete 3 times. Now, if I search for something like the word work, it only found it once. If I turn off the option to find whole words only, you see it found some additional words that the word work was part of. In this case, it's workout. Yeah, he says work or works or workout. So that setting there in search settings for whole words will influence whether you find a part of a word or the entire word there. So I'm going to strike that out. So if I click on the funnel, right now it's just set to show me text. I can have it highlight filler words. And that's not going to tell you what the filler word is. Again, it's auto-detected by language, but you can see how many filler words it detected in this transcript. I can just look at the pauses. It's going to highlight all the different pauses. Again, that's shown by the 3 ellipses there. And again, what it determines to be a pause is determined by that slider we set down here in the minimum pause length for the transcript view options. I can also change this to speakers, and then there's a drop down here below that becomes active, and I can just choose to look at text by those particular speakers. It's going to be highlighted. In this case, it's all of the quotes here from Keeland. I can also just choose to see the interviewer or anyone else who is in the speaker list here. And at the bottom there, I can get back to the search settings and the transcript view options, same as we had there at the bottom. Let me just turn this back to text. Now, next to that, there's 2 brackets here to automatically set in and out points. If you're going to be doing text-based editing, that switch needs to be turned on. If that is not on, the text-based editing portion will not work. Now, next to that, there are 2 buttons. If you have some text selected here, you can choose to split a segment. Let me go down in here into a larger chunk of text here where I put the cursor there. That's now split into 2 different segments. I can also highlight those 2 chunks of text and click the button there to merge those back together. Now, this pencil here is for editing the text, which we can do right here in the transcript window. You'll notice that his first name was misspelled here. Now, I can click in that text block and hit the pencil. That's going to turn it into this box here, and I can go in and clean that up. And then just click off the box to get out of it. Now, the other option without having to even hit the pencil is simply to double click on one of these text blocks, and that will also put you into edit mode. I'm going to capitalize that Cybex machine right there. And I'm just going to click away from it. So you're going to want to spend some time after it makes this transcript. You're going to want to spend some time going through it and doing some corrections and cleanup. You want to clean up any proper names, for example, make sure they're spelled correctly. Now, if you want to export the transcript at this point, perhaps for a producer or story editor for them to read through and to make notations for you, you can click on these 3 dots right here, and you've got options there to export the transcript. This first option here, export transcript, that's going to make a proprietary file that only Premiere Pro can read. You want to export to a text file or to a CSV, which is something that can be opened in Excel, for example, and it will be in a spreadsheet format. So either one of those there for the text export, and that will have the time code as part of the transcript so they can see when in the sequence or in the source clip it is being said. You can also choose to retranscribe a clip and change the language there. So if you realize, oh, you know what, I thought it was in English, but I chose to not auto-detect it, and it turns out they started speaking Spanish right off the bat, then you can change the language, and you can also choose, oh, I forgot to separate the speakers, so this time I can separate the speakers, and it's going to redo the whole transcript for you there. That's also where we can create captions once it's in the sequence. We don't have those options here. Those are grayed out. And we can go again to the transcript view options. There's 3 different places to get to those. And there's the option here to check spelling. All right, so it's going to check the spelling on certain words as it goes through. And you can select options for spell check there, what language, and learn or forget in a dictionary. So if there's certain proper nouns, for example, that keep coming up over and over, you can enter those words here and hit learn, and it's going to remember those words and it won't mark them as being misspelled. Incidentally, you can also bring in just raw audio files. You don't have to bring in a video clip. If you bring in a raw audio file, you can transcribe those as well. I'm going to import this multi-channel clip for the coach's interview, and I'll load that up in the source monitor. And I'm going to go into the audio clip mixer while this is running. Let me pull this over here and pull up that multi-channel audio. There we go.
Machine, bounding,
And there's some pretty big noise happening here.
Depends on how they're doing.
Okay. So when it comes to
All right, so this fan kicked in, and it's probably going to be a little hard to hear everybody.
We have to keep them very high.
All right, so I can tell by soloing some of the tracks in here in the audio clip mixer that channels 3 and 4 are a little further away from the subject, and it also picked up a lot of background noise. So maybe I don't want to use one of those for the transcript. It's both going to pick up the interviewer and not the subject, and there might be a microphone that was located a little bit closer to them on channel 1 and 2, perhaps a close boom or even a lavalier mic. So in that case, when I go to transcribe this clip, I have the option here under channel selection. I can do a mix down, which is going to look at all 4 of those channels together, or I can tell it to choose from one of the 4 channels that's embedded in that audio. In this case, I'm going to go with channel 1 because I know that's the cleaner audio that doesn't have so much noise in it, that was mic'd closer to the subject.
there's obviously so many competitors in the athletic drink space.
Track running myself. Grew up on certain fluids.
Okay. Now let me show you how to use text-based editing to quickly build a rough sequence of selects. So here I've got the coach interview. I've loaded the whole thing onto the timeline. I made no edits in the source monitor. This is the full interview here. And now that it's loaded into the sequence, because I had the follow active monitor switch selected, this changes to sequence view. And you notice here at the top, it's a little bit different. And now we have some editing options here. We can't change the speaker names, remember, in this, but we can actually delete now that we have things on the timeline, because that won't be deleting it from the source clip. We just want to delete it here from the sequence. Now, one of the things I want to do very quickly there is I want to strip out the interviewer's questions, because typically we don't hear those in the interview. We just want to hear the answers of the person that's being spoken to there. So I'm going to go to my funnel, and I'm going to go down and choose speakers. In this case, I'm going to choose interviewer. And those are all highlighted. And again, here we are in the program monitor view, the sequence view of this transcript. And now I have the option to delete. There's a trash can there, and it shows me that there are 12 segments where the interviewer is speaking. If I hit delete, I have one more thing to choose here, which is whether to extract or to lift, to delete one, which is the first one that's highlighted, or to delete them all. Now, if you extract, it's going to delete the clips and then close the gaps. If you do a lift, it's going to delete the clips, but it will leave the gaps there. In this case, I want to extract, in other words, close gaps once these are deleted, and I do want to get rid of all of them. So I'm going to hit delete all. And you see right there in the sequence, zoom in, it stripped out all the interviewer questions, and it's just the coach. Let me get rid of some of the other crew here really quickly. We don't need to hear the director speaking. That's only in one. Chop that out. And anyone who is unknown, I want to chop that out as well. Make sure that that wasn't inadvertently the coach talking there. No, I don't think so. So I'm going to then select unknown and delete all those as well. There we go. So now I just have a string of selects that is just the person talking, no other crew. And I can keep going here and choose those filler words. There are 11 filler words that were detected there. I want to make sure that those are deleted as well. I'm going to delete all, and again, extract. All right. That's making a lot of cut points here, and these are going to be jump cuts, so I'm going to have to cover those with a different camera angle or perhaps some B-roll, but that is stage 2. This is just stage 1, which is just getting this rough string out of the whole interview put together. And I can also choose any long pauses here. Again, those pauses were set there in the settings to determine how long of a pause you want to get rid of. There are 19 pauses in this. Delete all those as well. So very quickly, we've built a string out of all of the sound bites from this one interview subject, and we can go through and then pick the ones we want. Or now that we have this kind of packaged together, we can compare that to other sequences with other people that are talking and pull from this sequence and make a master sequence for all the interviews together, or start adding some B-roll or some cutaways to this to cover all of the edit points. Now you can also quickly build out your sequence by putting clips in the source monitor and just highlighting the section that you want to bring in right there in the transcript panel and then inserting it into your sequence. So in this case, I have two multicam clips here. I have an athlete interview here in the source monitor. Let me bring up my multicam button. So I have two camera angles for her, and I also have this coach interview. And they've both been transcribed, and they've both been turned into multicams with separate dual system audio that was synced with these camera angles here. So they're ready to go. And I'm going to find the section of this athlete's interview where she introduces herself. This is pretty close to the top. There we go. Hi, my name is Jenny Wu, and I am a sprinter. I want to put that right at the head of this sequence. Now, in order for this to work, again, these two brackets have to be set, automatically set at the in and out point. It's very important. So that switch up here has to be on. And now that that's on, I can choose the insert or overwrite buttons here, or the two that are in the source monitor, and whatever keyboard shortcut you have assigned to insert or overwrite will also work in this case. I'll just do a quick insert, and you see it placed it right there at the head of the timeline.
Hi, my name is Jenny Wu, and I am a sprinter.
All right, let me give that a little more space there at the end.
Hi, my
All right.
name is Jenny Wu, and I am a sprinter.
And now I can switch to the coach interview up here in the source monitor. Let me load that one. There we go. And let me find out where he introduces himself.
Hi, my name is Jenny Wu, and I am a sprinter.
Hi, I'm Keelan Matthews, and I'm a track coach.
All right, so I can keep going back and forth between those two. Go back in here to the source, just use that quick menu to go back and forth there between the two interviews and quickly just build all of this out. Grab that section right there, put the playhead here at the end.
And I'm a track coach.
I actually didn't want to know I wanted to do track and field. I wanted to be a
All right, so she stumbled a bit there. So again, once it's already in the timeline, I can just highlight that section right there. And you notice that it put in and out points there on the timeline. In this case, I want to get rid of that chunk that I brought in because she stumbled over her words. So I'm going to do a lift or an extract. Again, those buttons are now available here because the transcript panel switched to the program view, or I can use those two options here again under the program monitor. And again, if I do a lift, it's just going to chop it out. If I do an extract, it's going to delete and then close the gap.
And I'm a track coach.
I wanted to be a soccer star, and my mom ended up tricking me into do track and field so that I could get a scholarship and go to college, which thankfully for both of us, I did.
All right, I'll extend that just a little bit. There we go. And I can bounce back to the coach. And I just keep building this by hopping back and forth between those two in the source monitor, or laying down one of their clips in sections with some breaks in between, then going back and filling in those breaks with the other person's dialogue, and just kind of build out the whole sequence. I'll go back to the coach here. All right, he says today is Tuesday. I'll just drag and grab that real quick there, and I will drop that in.
Today is Tuesday, so we'll start her out on an 800 warm-up. Then after that,
He's talking about the workout he's about to put her through. And you can see it's building here in the transcript panel. Now it's building a brand new transcript based on what I'm putting here in the sequence. And this time code now no longer references the original source clips. This time code matches what's going on in the sequence here. And again, if there's something that I want to cut out, let's see, you get warmed up. I'll start, just chop out that little section right there. I'll do an extract. Close that gap.
and some drills, and then we'll dive into the meat of the workout.
I'll go into multicam mode, and I'll just change camera angles right there because I've got that available. And by switching camera angles, I'll get rid of the jump cut.
And then we'll dive into the meat of the workout.
So you can very quickly build a sequence of interviews going back and forth between two people, for example, like this, just by using those clips in the source monitor, highlighting the sections you want, bringing them down into the sequence, and putting them back to back like that, and then just use the lift or extract commands to pull out the sections you decide you don't want down the road. All using text-based editing, no need to touch the actual other tools. You don't have to razor blade anything or add edit points and delete. You can just go through the text panel, look at what's being spoken, and decide, I want to keep that or I want to get rid of that. You can even move these things around. So I'm going to put the playhead back here. I'm going to go back to the athlete interview, and I'm going to pull in another section here. And I'm going to do an insert, which is going to put that right after her previous answer and before the coach starts speaking.
We would have fun, we would challenge each other, and sometimes I would often throw up.
All right, that sounds like a fun little soundbite there to add after the coach. So now that I've watched it back, I decided, I want that a little bit later in the sequence. And again, going back through the sequence transcript now, I think I'm just going to select all of that. Sorry if this is a little gross. She says she's going to often throw up there after these workouts. I'm going to do an extract, again, which will close the gap. And I'm actually going to delete the rest of that. I decide I don't want that. I'm going to take that out and close the gap there. But I do want to keep that soundbite that I extracted. So if I go down to the end here and I hit paste, that soundbite was actually loaded onto the clipboard. When you extract or lift, you're actually putting that section on the clipboard, and it's still available unless you add something else to the clipboard after that. So it's still there, and you can basically, you're doing a cut, so you can do a paste, right? So I just pasted it back down there.
Done, we'll do some cool downs and then hit the weight room.
We would have fun, we would challenge each other, and sometimes I would often throw up.
All right, so I just added that back in. So you can mix and match right here on the timeline, and again, use the transcript to highlight the sections of text you want, lift them, and place them further down or further back, depending on where you want them to go. All using the text panel, just highlighting the sections you want and using those tools to move these things around. So eventually you'll wind up with your rough cut, and after you have it all kind of chopped up here, and again, the transcript is going to update whenever you add different clips to it or move clips around. And I may want to export a transcript. I'll click on those three dots. This time I'm doing it from the sequence and not the source. And I'm going to export to a text file, for example, and I can name it and place it someplace on my disk. And that's going to export it with the matching timecode from the sequence, not the source clips. Now, there may be some circumstances where you just want a transcript of only the portions of the clips that are in a timeline. You're not going to be using text-based editing, and you don't want to go back and transcribe an entire clip because maybe the source clip was really, really long, and you just want to transcribe exactly what's on the timeline. In that case, you want to generate what's called a static transcript. So I'm going to go open up a new sequence here. I have a clip that has not been transcribed yet. This is a small portion of a longer interview with this subject here. And you see there's no transcript yet. I do have the option to transcribe. That's going to transcribe the source clip, which might be who knows how long. Could be hours, right? So I just want to grab what is in the timeline and only what is in the timeline. So if I go here under the three dots, I can generate a static transcript. And you'll get a warning. It will not update as you edit. Because we're not transcribing the original source clips and we're not using text-based editing. This is a static transcript, so text and timing will be separated from each other. We can still choose the language to separate speakers. In this case, he's the only one talking, and I can choose what part of the track audio. And if you have in and out points and set them, then this box will become active and you can just transcribe between two in and out points. That transcript went really fast because it's a very short segment, and there it is.
First naval aviator in the Korean War, and devotion is about his devotion.
So if I select this, for example, and delete it, it's not going to remove the corresponding section of the video on the timeline because, again, this is not text-based editing. This is a static transcript, and they don't have a one-to-one correlation to each other. So once you've generated a static transcript, it's locked in place, and you can't do text-based editing at that point. You can go back and choose to make it a text-based editing transcript after the fact and it's going to ask you to go back and transcribe the source clips at that point. Now, the next step here is to turn our transcript into captions or subtitles. I've got my interview kind of put together here, and it's got a running transcript, and I want to turn this into captions. So you see there's no captions there. If I go to the Captions tab in the text panel here, there's no captions available. I can create captions from transcripts. So there's a nice button right there. Incidentally, if you are in the transcript panel and you go up here at the top, there's also the Create Captions button right there. So either one will get you to the same destination. When you click either of those buttons, it's going to ask you what type of caption do you want to create. We've got subtitles here. We also have closed captions in various flavors for both foreign and domestic. Typically in America, for example, it would be 608 or 708 captions, but you may be asked for different ones. I'm just going to go ahead and choose the 608 default there. And below that, I have some options for stream and style. The styling is not going to make much difference. That's not going to be determined by the program here. It's going to be determined by whatever streaming or broadcast service you place this video on. So I'm going to create captions from that. And there's my caption track above.
I did.
So when did it become, a serious sport?
Encouragement and discipline, but also you got to learn to have fun with it. You can't put too much pressure on yourself because that takes the fun out of it.
And now we have a captions track here running, and we can see that in the captions panel. It's broken up by segment, again, with time code, and
What
that
good is
follows
winning
along
if you can't enjoy it.
as you play through. And you'll see that's caption track 1, C1, and those are 608. Just like we chose in the other menu there. And I have caption track options here at the top. I can hide all caption tracks, show all caption tracks, or just show the active ones that were currently available. You only show one of these at a time typically. Now I can make additional captions tracks. I'm not just limited to one. So I can go back here, make another caption track. This time those can be subtitles. And I can even set a style for those if I have a style kind of plugged in, and create the captions there. And let me turn off the 608 captions, and these are the subtitles. Now these can be styled. I'm going to go here and select this one right here. And I'm going to pull up the properties panel, which will allow me to modify this text here. I'm going to drag it right here over the project window. And you see now I have font controls, for example. So I'm going to choose Myriad Pro Bold, and I'm going to change the font color to something a little brighter. There we go. Even give it a little bit of a drop shadow. There it goes. It's already on. And that looks pretty good. And I'm going to redefine the style, and I'm going to push that to all captions on the track. And now all of the subtitles, which was that caption track subtitle, they are all now styled. Now, if you want to learn more about styling text in Premiere Pro, both regular graphics as well as subtitles, be sure to check out our titles and graphics tutorial as well. Now, I can keep adding different caption tracks here if I want and stacking these up, and just preview the ones that I want to see by choosing the eyeball here. Incidentally, this is a final step. You definitely want to be done with your edit, especially your text-based editing, once you've created the captions. Because if you decide you want to start editing again, once these have been made, I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to mark this clip, and I'm going to lift it. You notice that did not remove the corresponding captions or subtitles. Those are still there. If you do an extract, it will take them out. But then you always run the risk, if you start moving things around, those captions and subtitles are not going to follow. If obviously you cut in additional footage at this point, it's also not going to follow. So you want to generate your subtitles or captions kind of at the very end. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you is the newest addition to the workflow here, which is translation. Premiere Pro can now translate your video from one language to another once it's already on the timeline and the captions have been made. So we do it at the captions stage, not at the transcription stage like we did earlier. So let me show you how this works. I'm going to go ahead and remove that subtitle track here. So I'm just dealing with one track of captions here. Those are my 608 closed captions. And I'm going to go here under the captions panel and click on the three dots. And you see I have the option there to translate. And here I'm going to choose the source language. It automatically detected that it was English. If that is wrong, I want to force it to a different language. I can obviously choose it from there. And then I select the target language here. And I'm going to choose French as well as Spanish. And I can choose what format those are going to be in. I'm going to stick with that 608 format for my captions, and no style or anything like that. And I can choose the same type of preferences there for the length in characters, the duration, and whether I do single and double line. There is a caveat down here at the bottom. This feature does require cloud processing. So this will go up to the cloud and use some cloud processing to generate these translations. It's not going to happen on machine. I'll hit translate, and then I'll check the progress wheel here. And you see it sending those captions up to the cloud. And there we go. And now I have two more subtitle streams here. Let me turn off that base layer. There's French.
To be a soccer star, and my mom ended up tricking me into do track and field.
All right, and then we also have Spanish.
So that I could get a scholarship and go to college, which thankfully for both of us, I did.
So when did it become... There you go. That's translation right there on the timeline. Again, you have to generate captions first, and then you translate those captions. And you're obviously going to want to do a quick spot check, make sure that they're accurate. You can go through and use the editing feature there in the captions panel to change the text if it needs to be edited in any way. But this is a really easy way to quickly stack up different captions tracks of different translations of all of your material here. And you can always go back and add more translation later if you need it. So in this case, the English is turned back on. I want to make sure I see the English captions here in the panel. Go back to the three dots, or you can even right click down here on the timeline and translate captions to get to the same dialog box there. This time instead, I'm going to go to Danish, and that's going to create another track. Once it's finished, there we go. There's my Danish.
You know, track became a serious sport for me when I ended up actually going to college for it.
Now, if you want to export these captions to an SRT file, you can do that by going back in here to the captions panel, clicking on the three dots. And now the export menu gives you the option to export to SRT. I can choose that, file format SRT. Now I'm going to pop open that export and place the text panel here above Premiere Pro. You can see the time code. So whatever caption track is active, in that case, it's going to export those captions as the SRT. So if I want English, I want to make sure that the Danish is turned off, the English is turned on. Go back up here and export to SRT, and those will be the English captions in an SRT format. Now I have other format options if I choose to export it as a QuickTime file. So here on the export panel, I'm going to change the format to QuickTime. And here under captions, let me turn that option on, and I can burn the captions into the video. In this case, I want to create a sidecar file, and that gives me more options here. I can also choose a sonorous closed caption file and SCC, mark caption vanc file, .mcc, a .xml for W3C and SMPTE EBU, burned in time text file, or there's SRT again. In addition to sidecar file, I can also embed in the output file if it can support it. In this case, a QuickTime ProRes file can. And I'm going to embed that in the output file, and it's going to choose the caption track that I turned on, which was C1, which is my English captions. And that will be embedded in this QuickTime when I export. Now, if you want to embed multiple caption tracks in the output, you want to make sure that each one is assigned to a different stream. So here, I'm going to right-click next to the caption track and go to Track Settings. And English there is set to stream CC1, and I'm going to assign French to CC2. Yep, that's good. Spanish should be on CC3. And let me just check my Danish because that was the new one. That's on the wrong one. So let's set that to CC4. So now we actually have 4 different streams. You don't want them all assigned to the same stream. It should be a different stream per each language. And hit OK. And now when I go to export and turn on the captions option for this QuickTime embed, you see I'm going to get the English stream there, the French, which is labeled Spanish, and Danish as well. all embedded in the same QuickTime output. That's it for transcription, translation, and text-based editing in Premiere Pro. Hopefully you got a lot out of this lesson, and I'll see you on the next one.